I don't think there's a company out there with as many licensed products as Disney. Hit up the toy aisle of any store, there's some Disney. Book section, Disney. Everywhere, Disney. Especially now that they own all of the things. Which of course means video games. If you ever ask someone what were some of the licensed games they played growing up, they more than likely dropped a Disney one or two. It's even more likely that those were good. Licensed video games typically have a rep of being, not at all rushed and terrible, and at least in the 90s and 2000s, typically something with that Walt Disney logo was pretty dope. Unless it wasn't, but we've already done bad Disney games, so here we are 5 years later, finally recovered from PK Out of the Shadows and ready to talk about some good memories. A little less Fantasia for the Genesis, and a little more Maui Mallard. I would actually put money down on there being good old Disney games with every generation of gaming since the NES, and that's honestly pretty wild to think about. Disney as a license is less straightforward than, say, 30 years of Dragon Ball Z video games, but it also gives us a ton of ideas and properties to do. You ever wanted to play a Pocahontas platformer? How about a Hunchback of Notre Dame minigame activity center? Or Oliver and Company for DOS? If there was a movie or TV show, Disney more than likely made a game for it. Good or bad, there's no escape.
So yo, it's Austin, and today we're going to be talking about a handful of good Disney games. Now, there's a lot to pick from, and the spectrum of quality is all over the place, but that's kind of what happens when there's like literally hundreds to choose from. Kind of reminds me of how when I was younger and in marching band, we actually marched in the Disney parade, and they show you this tape before you go on that has like a list of all their properties and their expectations, and it kind of picks up pace and goes faster and faster until it zooms out on the planet Earth with Mickey ears on it. It's a little terrifying. But before we get started with our hunt for some good Disney games, we got a sponsor. One that'll let you play some good old retro games online for free, Jam.gg. Jam.gg is a new social gaming platform for those who are fans of retro or just want to be able to play things quick and easy with their friends online. This thing's pretty dope. You can easily make lobbies in browser or on mobile, pick any of the 100 plus games they got and get going. They've got games from all kinds of classic consoles too, NES, Super Nintendo, PlayStation 1, and even the Sega Genesis. All I'm saying is that if you want to casually hop into a game of Worms World Party, it's just a couple clicks away, and it's free.
That's the wrong one. Oh no.
There's a lot of neat features to play around with too. There's a video chat system that uses avatars that also allows you to put on little things on your webcam. You want to be a llama? Be a llama, that's fine. You don't even need a super fast internet connection. It all works well in browser. But most importantly, the games. They have a lot of stuff like Worms, there's also Scars, Xenocrisis, and they recently teamed up with SNK, so you got titles like Sengoku 3 or Metal Slug X, and who doesn't like Metal Slug? Jam.gg is easy to browse, so you can always hop into a game with people in the various public rooms. You can browse by game or even moods if you're having trouble deciding. If you're feeling something social, check out the social mood and see what others are playing. To be honest, I just love that I'm able to play Magical Drop 2 with anyone online at any time. I mean, come on. So if you're wanting to join a new social platform and play games online for free, check out jam.gg by clicking the link in the description. But for now, good Disney games. Let's get the ball rolling by talking about the one company that at the time could do no wrong, Capcom.
Back in the late 80s and early 90s, Disney struck a deal with Capcom to make a ton of licensed games, and to this day, people consider them to be some of the best out there. Not just Disney games, but like licensed ones in general. I mean, some of these are getting re-released in HD collections as recently as last year. Look, all I'm saying is that there's no one out there trying to port that Chip 'n Dale DOS game that clearly hinted at the future. But you know what was good? Capcom's Chip 'n Dale games. They made two of these on the NES, the second one coming out all the way in 1994, and they're both pretty good. With the very rare exception of something like Adventures in the Magic Kingdom, just about every Capcom-made Disney game was a banger. Darkwing Duck is an excellent Mega Man clone with a rockin' soundtrack. DuckTales is considered to be an absolute classic that even got a remake by WayForward all the way in 2013. The Super Nintendo Magical Quest trilogy is just pleasant. Also, don't forget about The Little Mermaid, a game with visuals on the top tier of the NES. But I want to talk about one that's a little less, well, loved, and it's Tailspin. I freaking loved Tailspin. The cartoon itself was in reruns by the time I was able to understand and digest media past the baby sensory video stage, but it always struck a chord with me. The adventures of Baloo and Kid working as a cargo delivery troupe were extremely memorable, and after watching Jungle Book as a kid like 1,000 times, I was just impressed that Mr. Bare Necessities could fly. Between this and SWAT Cats, the world was swimming in the whole anthropomorphic characters flying planes category of television. Between these two shows and the several video games between the two of them, Capcom, there's only one good game, and it's Capcom. I think Tailspin gets overlooked often because it's, at its core, a shmup. And not just that, it's a relatively simple one, though very solid. As a kid, it was my first introduction to the concept of like auto-scrolling shooters. It definitely feels like a watered-down version of something like Gradius or 1942, but you can't go upside down in those games. By flipping your plane around, you can reverse the scrolling, which is useful to get hidden items and power-ups. You can even shoot backwards. You fly around as Blue, shooting massive balls at dudes, although very slowly, and you can angle them diagonally. There's a satisfying sound effect when shots connect, and all the boss fights are unique, although a bit easy. It's a pretty short game, and it's not very difficult, but Tailspin's kind of like baby's first shoot 'em up, and it's one that's stuck in my brain for multiple decades now. The music's great, the controls are solid, it's got that Capcom polish. It's kind of considered the black sheep of the Disney Capcom games, and probably solely because it's a shooter as opposed to a platformer. Is it as good as Darkwing Duck? No, I don't think so, but it is the one that I find myself going back to the most. It's a solid 30 to 40 minute game, kind of like Rocket Knight Adventures, and I think that everyone should try it out at some point. Just don't accidentally play the Sega Genesis one, trust me. I don't have a joke to end this section, so
It was really hard to go wrong with Capcom back in the days, but shame about the 2010s. Let's move forward to the year 2000. Now, around this time, Disney would start to work with different developers and publishers, so the quality would start to get a little iffy here and there. Thankfully, we would still see good stuff from unexpected developers, such as Crystal Dynamics.
yeah, Crystal Dynamics, like Gex, Legacy of Kain, and newer Tomb Raider Crystal Dynamics. Eidos as a publisher was in a weird spot in the early 2000s. Core's Tomb Raider was still all the rage, and they were like one of the biggest supporters of European video game developers. They were also publishing the PC versions of Final Fantasy 7 and 8 for some reason. But the second the turn of the century would hit, we would see Eidos' name on like Berserk, Chicken Run, The Italian Job, and of course, some Walt Disney stuff.
Goofy is huge. Goofy could beat up Dad.
The two put out a PR statement saying they were doing the big old team up, and that would last for a solid 3 games, 2 of which by Crystal Dynamics. 102 Dalmatians, Puppies to the Rescue, and Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour. 11 syllables of power that really didn't need to have the words world or quest in it.
Apparently 102 Dalmatians is decent, but I'm gonna focus on World Quest because it's a kart racer and I'm very simple.
Well, hello there.
Gonna say it, Jiminy Cricket shouldn't have teeth, that's no good. Although I think we could all learn a lesson for face motion capture here. Let's just call this one Magical Racing Tour, cause ain't no one got time for that whole name. This thing came out on the PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast with a weird Game Boy port on the side. I played a lot of the console version. I know that there's another kart racer that came out around the same time, one made by Rare called Mickey Speedway USA, although I never got around to that as a kid. They both came out in the same year, but look, your parents are only gonna buy like one of these when you're 10. The weird part is that besides Jiminy Cricket, Chip, and Dale, every character here is a weird original one. Yeah, no Mickey Mouse, Minnie, Donald Duck, or anything like that, but at least we can play as fan favorite Otto Plugnut. Thank God. Racing Tour is a tour through the Magical Kingdom, taking us through racetracks based on Disney theme park rides. You've got Pirates of the Caribbean, Space Mountain, Big Thunder Mountain, and even the Rock and Roller Coaster. No Aerosmith though. Chip and or Dale will not be loving in an elevator. Mechanically, this feels a lot closer to Crash Team Racing than Mario Kart, which is something I dig personally. The courses are all bouncy and quick. Drifting helps you take corners really tight. The camera's really close and you feel like you're going 100 miles an hour. This is a pretty good multiplayer kart racer, one that you'd play with a bunch of friends growing up, though it doesn't have too much in the way of single player content. Like a lot of kart racers at the time, you can basically run through everything in a few hours and be done. It's certainly no Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, literally nothing is, the truest GOAT, even if it has 2 songs in game that are literally copy-pasted from Gex. No, seriously. There's something special about seeing racing courses based on a theme park I've been to completely reimagined in that, well, literal theme park kart racing style, and I kinda love it. By all means, Crystal Dynamics could have tossed this into the wild completely half-baked, but they didn't, and it shows. I haven't had much time with Mickey Speedway USA, but I'd be willing to bet that between both of those, the Venn diagram of Disney fans and kart racing fans are a happy bunch. And if you like this, there's also Toy Story Racer, but we'll do Pixar another time. It's not perfect, but Walt Walt Disney World registered trademark Quest: Magical Racing Tour trademark is a pretty solid kart racing game for kids, and it's something that I think holds up pretty well. I will say though, looking at the European cover, that there might have been some cut content, seeing as how you got someone flying and another Disney OC Do Not Steal in the water, but unfortunately it's not Diddy Kong Racing. Just make sure not to look at the American cover for too long. You okay there, Dale? Got something on your mind?
Let's take it back for a second. Let's say that instead of a Nintendo console, you had a Sega Genesis. Well, you wouldn't be getting many of the Capcom games, but you would be getting ones made by Sega themselves. And some of those were fantastic.
Like Quackshot, a platformer I talked about a while ago. This hybrid of DuckTales and Indiana Jones is one of my favorite Genesis games to this day, and it definitely holds up. Just maybe stay away from Fantasia. I'm one of those freaks that thinks the Genesis version of Aladdin is the superior one, but all of it starts with a little game that came out in 1990 called Castle of Illusion, starring Mickey Mouse. It's hard not to like this one, and how can you not? It's got a simple goal. Evil witch comes down, steals your girl, and you gotta go get her back from the spooky castle. Sure, you go through levels piece by piece with basic but solid platforming, throwing apples and jumping on dudes' heads left and right. Considering this thing predates the original Sonic the Hedgehog, it's one heck of an impressive thing for the time. Weirdly, it came out on the same day as Super Mario World in Japan, but considering the Mega Drive is older hardware, I dig it. This thing got a really cozy remake in 2013 that I played a bunch and do recommend. But at least to me, both of those games pale in comparison to the 1992 sequel, World of Illusion. Developed by Sega AM7, the group that would later be responsible for Streets of Rage 2 and Phantasy Star 4, World of Illusion sits up there with the best of them. It's like they took the original game, injected it with a dose of blast processing, and made a platformer that's so unique it's hard not to love. So in World of Illusion, you play as either Mickey or Donald, who are sent into a magical realm by an evil Pete. This time around, there's a whole theater magician aesthetic to everything. Your main method of attacking is a magical cape, your health are represented by cards, the Ace of Spades and Hearts. The music and graphic detail are fantastic for the Genesis, almost whimsical, and there's a lot of influence from other Disney properties here. But the big kicker is that it's multiple games in one. You can play this thing single player like any other game, sure, or you can go through the entire adventure in two-player co-op. There's a subgenre of like co-op platformers from this time that tend to be hit and miss. For every killer, like Gunstar Heroes or Adventures of Batman and Robin, you had one with a little sibling mode like Sonic 2. World of Illusion is not that though. In fact, the entire game is completely different depending on which mode you play. For instance, sometimes you gotta crawl through little spaces. Well, canonically, Donald Duck is packing, I guess, a little more dumpy, and because of that, he can't fit through the small gaps. In single player, you have to turn around and you're taken to a completely different level, but in co-op, you have to like have your partner squeeze him through the gap, complete with a cute animation. There's a lot of stuff like this, moments where it turns from a generic platformer into a cute and memorable experience that's just filled with heart. Yeah, I'm saying that the game with Donald Duck booty physics has heart. The only negative I can think of is that it's relatively easy, especially for a 16-bit game, but there's nothing wrong with that. I find it fascinating that the levels and bosses completely change depending on if you're playing co-op or not. Sega didn't have to do that, but they did, and the amount of effort they put in here is totally indicative of the quality of this game. There's also the feature of kicking your second player out of the game if they keep dying, which definitely caused a lot of fights back in '92. There's a lot of Mickey Mouse-centric platformers, but I think World of Illusion is easily my favorite of the bunch. There's a bunch of other Illusion games, most of which came out on the Master System or Game Gear, but World's the top. All I'm saying is that if Disney and Sega wanted to do another remake or even a port, just give me the option to drop my partner as they're climbing. Yeah, that'd be neat.
A lot of what we've been talking about at this point have been retro platformers, and I guess that's not much of a surprise. A licensed platformer is pretty much the easiest thing to toss in the wild, but they weren't all like that. There's a couple of well-known games in this video, but one of the most obscure has to be Tron 2.0. This game's cool.
Tron is a classic. It was a rare live-action film in a time when Disney was most known for their animation. If you were to try to distill the early 80s into like one movie, it would probably be this, or like War Games. It's pretty dark for a Disney film doing a whole isekai thing where the master program, a rogue AI, decided that people suck, let's make them all fight to the death. Then Jeff Bridges saves the day with Tron, then they high-five, Disney's upset about it being a financial disappointment, 20 years later it turns into a cult hit and we get sequels, video games, and a dope Daft Punk soundtrack. soundtrack. Nice. The original was a visual pioneer, and with anything sharing the name coming out after, you would expect the same kind of treatment. Well, when this movie came out in 1982, there was a neat arcade game and a few various things, but afterwards, not so much. And by that, I mean the franchise died and went dormant for 20 years. The whole concept of shows going inside the computer would be seen in other things like a reboot, but Tron's aesthetic was something special. Fast forward 20 years, enter Monolith Productions. You might know them for Fear, the Condemned series, or Shadow of Mordor. But at this time, they were most famous for No One Lives Forever and Alien vs. Predator 2. Frankly, these dudes rule, and they were handed the ultimate keys in the shape of Tron 2.0. No movie tie-in, just a cool opportunity to make an actual sequel to a 2-decade-old movie. And they nailed it. Tron 2.0 is a first-person shooter that not only follows the original story, but even has a few of the original cast members. There is a story, yes, but none of that is as important as the fact that the game is really fun to play. Being from the early 2000s, it's got that keycard map design, but it totally works with Tron. The levels are big and open, not so much confusing, so there's a clear path to victory. You play as a guy named Jet Bradley, son of Incom programmer Alan Bradley, who looks like the type of guy who'd pour his coffee out on the sidewalk. And for his punishment, computer death games.
If you die in the game, you die for real.
2.0 is like 2 games in one. First off, the campaign. It's a pretty decently sized single-player experience that takes us through several computers, tons of levels, and lots of neon lights. There's a bunch of weapons, including your standard gun types, and a tossable disc. Keeping things Tron-themed, you can upgrade these guns with sub-routines or passive bonuses. There's a fun little system where your abilities will be corrupted by green enemies, and you'll have to defrag them before you can use them again. Yeah, it's just inventory management, but it's a unique way to do it. It helps that there's a lot of variety in the level design, like a lot. You have wave survival and platforming, and it's been a long time since I remember an FPS having jumping puzzles. The boss fights feel like they fit into the Tron universe, and there's a lot of fun dialogue in smaller moments, like when you're in a club and you ask everyone what their favorite song is, and they're like, oh yeah, track 6? Track 6.mp3 freaking rules? Tell DJ EXE to turn up. This era of boomer shooter, I hate the genre name, all follows a similar set of rules, but Tron 2.0 really benefits from its style, minus the fall damage. Imagine dying from fall damage in a computer. The retrofuturism aesthetic really allowed Monolith to have fun with the level design, guns, and the gameplay systems. This is easily one of the best licensed games out there, especially as a shooter. And to top it all off, there's another entirely separate challenge and multiplayer mode for the light cycles. Everyone who saw Tron remembers those things, and they made a fantastic rendition of this digital death game in the game, one that you can play with friends. The only problem here is that getting it set up on modern computers can be kind of a pain. Yeah, it's on Steam, but it's not really a fan of anything higher than Windows 8. Did 2.0 revitalize Tron? Nah, probably not as much as Kingdom Hearts 2, which is a sentence. But I can say that the next time they tried to make a game in this world, it wasn't great. Tron Evolution, very mid. It goes to show that Monolith Productions knew what they were doing and is a top-tier developer. I mean, I even liked that Lord of the Rings MOBA they made, but I'm kind of a goblin. Since Tron Legacy came out, 2.0 was deemed non-canon, but it's absolutely something you should try. As a Disney fan, as a video game fan, it doesn't matter. Tron 2.0 rules.
There's a lot of totally solid Disney games out there that don't really give me much to say, but I want to talk about them anyway, so lightning round. After all, how much can I really say about Dance Dance Revolution Disney Mix?
Huey, Dewey, and Louie confirmed Initial D fans. In the early 2000s, Dance Dance Revolution was like the most popular thing ever, so of course, Disney would team up with Konami to make them one of those. One that is all Eurobeat, baby. Yeah, sure, it's not as unhinged and horrifying as Mickey Unwrapped with its banger tracks like What a Mouse. You ever wanted to hear Minnie rap?
And I know that he is loyal, cause you never hear about him with another girl.
But we do get the ducking hardcore mix of It's a Small World. I mean, it's DDR. Not a particularly difficult one, but a decent gateway for people looking to get schmoove into Eurobeat. I'm just surprised to see B4U on the same track list as Zippity Doodah. How about Hercules for the PlayStation 1 and PC? Prior to being run into the ground by Activision, developer Eurocom was responsible for a lot of dope licensed games. If you were into James Bond as a kid, you probably played a ridiculous amount of Nightfire. That Ski Mountain level? 10 out of 10. Early into the PlayStation 1's lifespan, they'd work with Disney to make a few games like Tarzan Superman and Atlantis, but the one that sticks out to me is Hercules. It's the rare 2.5D platformer during a time when they weren't doing many of those. It's a fantastic adaptation of the film in a video game that goes from Herc training to be a hero from a zero. Heck, they even got Danny DeVito to reprise his role as Phil, something Kingdom Hearts 3 failed spectacularly.
Nice work! Excelente!
Phil, you should go with Meg.
The combination of 3D environments and the running segments with the well-animated sprites looking very similar to the movie's animation was fantastic for the time, and well, it was just fun to play. I think, just like the film, this one gets overlooked. Screw these birds though. Speaking of overlooked, how about the time Disney made an animated film that wasn't a musical? The Emperor's New Groove is in my top 5 Disney films for sure, and that's probably like 90% Kronk.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
There were a ton of PlayStation 1 Disney games that everyone's totally forgotten about, like Lilo and Stitch, The Little Mermaid 2, Treasure Planet, Aladdin and Nasira's Revenge. The list is very long, so obviously something like The Emperor's New Groove would get a little buried in the mix. But what you don't know is that it's a totally solid 3D platformer that tried a lot of interesting things. Developed by Argonaut Software, the people who made Croc and the original Star Fox, we'd get a game that captures the goofy essence of the film while also taking advantage of the fact that you are controlling a llama. Ocarina of Time-esque stealth sequences, floating down the river, gameplay that may or may not resemble Spyro the Dragon, you got it. Remember that bit in the film where Kuzco's rapidly changing animals while trying out different potions? Yeah, they made that a mechanic. With the exception of the roller coaster level, which is very frustrating, The Emperor's New Groove is a super underrated time, one that sure loves breaking that fourth wall.
She'll be back. I've seen it in the script.
I'm gonna go watch that movie again. But not before playing Magical Tetris Challenge. Capcom didn't make too many licensed Disney games after the Super Nintendo era, but they sure stuck it out a bit longer in order to bring us Magical Tetris Challenge. Look, it's Tetris. Well, one with a small spin, hence the whole magical part. But considering Tetris might be one of the only perfect video games out there, that's no problem. Rather than random garbage going to your opponents, you send big ol' get destroyed patterns over to them. It's fast-paced, it's very well made on both the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64, and it even had a good Game Boy Color port. Why Disney, you ask? Why not? This story is complete nonsense, just like your Pokemon Puzzle Leagues and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machines, but it does have some killer songs to play to. Seriously, they have no business going this hard. Based Capcom. Catch me in a dark alley playing Magical Tetris Challenge for money. Double Pinterest, baby. All right, one more lightning round game. I was considering Split Second because Split Second rules, but that's just something they published. There's no mouse there, no licenses being evoked. So instead, let's go back to Eurocom. Prior to Herc, they were doing some 16-bit stuff, none as weird as Maui Millard. Donald Duck and Maui Millard, or Maui Millard and Cold Shadow. This platformer was absurd. Its existence was completely baffling, and I love that it's a thing, cause it's freaking awesome. Coming out all the way in January 1997 in the States, Maui Millard is one of the first games that Disney was a proper publisher for. They went all out trying to promote this one, even putting kiosks for it in Epcot. There's a few differences between the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions, and this is one of those cases where I prefer the Super Nintendo one. Not that I really got the chance to play the Genesis one because it was a Sega Channel exclusive for a bunch of red tape reasons. Maui Millard has you play as Donald, as Maui, who can become a ninja named Cold Shadow. When you're in normal form, you got a little blaster, and as a ninja, you can do a bunch of whacking with the bow staff. It's a simple concept with some of the most over-the-top animation you'd see on the Super Nintendo. Some magic in this cartridge. I have distinct memories of this game, going from this colorful tourist vacation that Donald Duck's going on to this weird hellscape. It actually reminds me a lot of Earthworm Jim. Maybe a bit literally. Maui Millard, despite being pretty good and promising us a sequel, was promptly over after this. The metafictional stuff of character being an actor was a really cool concept, but it was a bit too little too late, as the next generation of consoles already took the market by storm. I mean, why would you get Maui Millard when you can already play Mario 64? It's pretty sad, but after this, Disney Interactive Studios just made activity centers for several years. Until extremely goofy skateboarding, and that's not good.
There's a lot, and sure, most of them are platformers, but there's just not enough time to talk about the entire spectrum in detail. But literally everything we've covered up until this point is something that I would recommend. However, we got one more game to talk about today, and I think we should stick with Disney Interactive Studios. Now, whenever Disney decided to make their own publishing company, you would assume that they wanted the quality of games to go up, and I think that was totally what they had in mind when they were making Epic Mickey. I remember this being a pretty big deal. Epic Mickey is the brainchild of Buena Vista Games and Junction Point Studios, a developer headed by Warren Spector of Ultima, Deus Ex, and System Shock fame. Originally wanting to make a game based off of Oswald the Rabbit, Epic Mickey is something that got stuck in development hell for a long while. Disney didn't have the rights to Oswald, so there's a whole thing about them trading with NBC Universal for sportscaster Al Michaels. Yeah, for real, it's a wild story. But the finished product, Epic Mickey for the Wii, was a huge effort to revitalize Mickey Mouse as a character. Everything looks retro, much more similar to Mickey Mania than, say, your Kingdom Hearts. They went all out on marketing for this, even having Marvel make a comic for it. It was a planned trilogy that only ended up with 2 games, a closed studio, and no mention for the last decade. So, something clearly went wrong. That first game is something special, though. I never got a chance to play this until this video, and color me impressed. I'm usually not one for anything with motion controls, but Epic Mickey does it in a way that makes sense and feels decent enough. I'm still not a fan of the Wiimote though, can't change that. So like any old Disney cartoon, it starts with Mickey causing a ridiculous amount of trouble and destroying an entire dimension. What a prick. He spills this magic ink on top of a paper recreation of Disneyland by Yen Sid that turns into its own evil entity. Turns out he just casually wrecked Oswald the Rabbit's kingdom. Good going. Well, then he's sucked in, nearly murdered by a chainsaw before finding a magic paintbrush and embarking on a journey to fix his mistakes. Yeah, this one's a little dark, but at the same time, so charming and memorable. Mickey's, epic journey takes him through several old cartoons, interacting with characters completely forgotten in 2022, and all in a world unlike anything I've seen. It's a bit dark on the color scheme as a whole, but it makes sense considering the story happening. Keeping it super 2010 though, we've got ourselves a morality system. Yeah, like Mass Effect and Shadow the Hedgehog style morality meter. The paintbrush Mickey uses has the ability to use thinner to erase and paint to create. You can thin out enemies to straight up Thanos them out of existence, or use a paintbrush to try and make them friendly with you. This has an effect on the type of upgrades you'll receive as well as the ending you get, so pick wisely. Does your Mickey Mouse become an evil maniac? You decide. The game controls are really fluid, and the only issue I can see people having is the incorporation of the Wiimote. You have your standard platforming controls, but any attacks have to be manually aimed with the cursor or a shake. This can be frustrating when you're trying to dodge dudes or if the sensor does the typical Wii wonky thing, but it's relatively forgiving since it was trying to be a kid's game. Epic Mickey teeters on the realm of unsettling while also feeling like a real adventure, or an epic rather. The only major thing that holds it back is the fact that there's a good amount of backtracking that you have to do, which can be annoying as there's no easy method to get from point A to B. It's technically a level-based game, but you'll be going back for items and hidden treasures as you unlock new power-ups. And you get to these levels by going through side-scrolling segments based off of classic cartoons. The game feels fine in these segments, it's just tedious because you have to go through it a bunch. I know the overall reception of Epic Mickey seems to be mixed, leaning positive. I think it's a solid licensed game in 2010, one when the Wii was knocking it out of the park. Anyone for Mario Sports Mix? It's just unfortunate that this love didn't translate over to the sequel, Epic Mickey 2: The Power of 2. Despite being released on 6 platforms as opposed to 1, its reception and sales were so poor that Disney straight up closed Junction Point Studios 2 months after its release. Ouch. We'll definitely take a look at this another time, as Epic Mickey was a mini franchise that had a crazy amount of potential, and of course I got a rep any studio that was located in Austin, Texas, but this video was for good games, and this, well, yeah. And well, there you have it, good Disney games. I covered a lot of my favorites, and like I said earlier, everything in this video is something that I would recommend, but if I had to pick just one, I would say go try out Tron 2.0. That game is really cool and unique. Or like Magical Tetris Adventure. That's kind of cheating. We didn't get too deep into the portable ports at the time, like your Game Boys and Game Gears, and I know there's probably a lot of stuff that I miss in that regard, so if there's something that you think I would like or should check out, please let me know in the comments down below. Just don't write Disney sports skateboarding. Yeah, I'm watching you. Also, yes, we will be doing a good Pixar games sometime in the future. I'm not sure when, but I have to talk about Toy Story 3. That game rules. Anyways, I've been Austin, and catch me next time when we finally talk about Metal Gear Survive, because, took me a while.
Thank you all so much for watching. So a quick announcement, I'm gonna be doing a charity stream on the 11th of June, starting at noon Central, that's 1 o'clock Eastern, and I've decided for some personal reasons and also in honor of Pride Month that I'm gonna be doing it supporting the Trevor Project. So make sure to follow me on twitch.tv/Austin Eruption to help support a good cause today. I'm very excited to do this, and I can't wait to see y'all there. Special Patreon shout out to Blackfoot Ferret, Chris Shelton, Christopher Olivia, Darren Newton, Doug Prince, DX Buster, David Molnar, Elijah, GM Pinks, Hey Quiggles, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Kevin Zanowski, Kieran Arter, Nick Irving, P-Funk, Randall Bentley, Ryan Talbert, and Shazam. Thank you all so much for your generous support. I hope y'all enjoy the amount of content we've been putting out lately. We've been hard at work, and I think that it shows. Metal Gear Survive should be out within the next 10 days or so, but we'll see. I'm doing my best. Till then, y'all have a good one, and I love you. Freya loves you too. She's on my lap.